Good day. The clock is ticking in the Middle East, and US President Trump finds himself at a critical juncture needing a clear success. The central question on everyone's mind: can the United States achieve its war objectives in Iran with ground troops? If so, what scenarios are plausible, and how high would the risks truly be? President Trump is actively seeking an exit from the conflict. He has repeatedly reassured his critics and the restless markets that the war against Iran would end very soon. Yet his signals about the quickest path to this desired exit are strikingly contradictory. On one hand, he praises what he describes as highly successful negotiations with Iran. He even suggests the region could be left without an agreement or without a formal opening of the Strait of Hormuz. On the other hand, the president has ordered the deployment of Marines and special forces to the region, openly threatening a ground war. This is presented as a means to deliver what he calls the final blow to the Iranian regime. The obvious question arises: is an escalation coming before an exit? Reports from March 29, 2026 indicate that the US military has indeed prepared plans for a possible ground troop deployment in Iran. Beyond the ongoing airstrikes in Iran, the US armed forces have established an additional layer of deterrence. In addition to the troops already stationed in the Middle East, the United States has dispatched special forces and Marines to the region. Their numbers are estimated to be between 10,000 and 15,000. However, this scale is vastly different from the troop deployments seen during the overthrow of Saddam Hussein in Iraq in 2003, or the liberation of Kuwait in 1991, both of which involved several 100,000 US soldiers. Colonel Markus Reisner, a military expert and historian with the Austrian Armed Forces, acknowledges in a podcast that a US ground offensive against Iran is possible. However, he strongly warns of significant risks. He points out that Iran has continued to prove its military capabilities and enjoys support from both Russia and China. Other military analysts concur, suggesting that if President Trump does authorize ground operations, they would likely be very limited in both time and geographical scope. And political scientist Groite, speaking on March 27, 2026, observed that a clear strategy from the United States is not discernible. Public speculation frequently centers on three core scenarios for ground operations. Scenario 1. U.S. Special Forces could attempt to secure the highly enriched uranium, estimated at around 400 kilograms, believed to still be in Iran. As long as the regime in Tehran has access to this nuclear material, the risk of it obtaining an atomic bomb persists. The challenge, however, is finding the uranium, which might be divided among multiple subterranean nuclear facilities in central Iran, or even buried by recent airstrikes. The longer such a special forces operation lasts, the riskier it becomes. Scenario 2. The United States could occupy Kharg Island, located just over 30 kilometers off the Iranian coast. This island is a strategic crown jewel for the regime, handling approximately 90% of Tehran's oil sales. The US has already conducted airstrikes on Kharg, and President Trump has repeatedly speculated about its occupation. However, US ground troops so close to the Iranian mainland would be highly vulnerable. Scenario 3. The United States might attempt to break the Iranian blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, a vital artery for commercial shipping. This could involve occupying land or small islands along the strait. Military expert Markus Reisner views this as the most extensive and riskiest option, and consequently the least likely, especially given that the area is larger than Vietnam. President Trump has also publicly distanced himself from the plan to take control of the Strait of Hormuz and Sea. The United States does hold a significant advantage. Weeks of airstrikes have largely neutralized Iran's air defenses. Therefore, any landing by U.S. special forces, whether by parachute from transport aircraft or via helicopters, would almost certainly be accompanied and secured by substantial air support. Nevertheless, the deployment of ground troops would dramatically increase the overall risk. The surprise element is already lost, as possible deployment locations have been openly speculated upon for days. Iran has had time to prepare and could attempt to raise the cost for the US with mines or booby traps. There is also the persistent threat from Shahed drones and short-range ballistic missiles, which Iran still possesses. These could be deployed in any of the three scenarios. The United States and its allies have painfully learned through experiences in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Somalia in 1993 the psychological shockwaves that rising casualties among their own soldiers can unleash on the home front. Following the downing of 2 Black Hawk helicopters and the deaths of 18 US soldiers in a 1993 anti-terror operation, the United States abruptly withdrew from Somalia. So the question now is whether the special forces in the region are merely a deterrent aimed at coercing Iran into negotiations, or if they will actually be sent into a limited yet high-risk operation. And on. One hand, having boots on the ground in Iran could achieve objectives not met by airstrikes, making the mission easier to sell as a success. On the other hand, it would further distance President Trump from his promise to his increasingly uneasy MAGA voter base to keep the United States out of distant war zones. It would also increase the risk of a perceived humiliating defeat. Colonel Reisner believes the ongoing discussion clearly indicates one thing. President Trump is trying to save face and exit this situation in some dignified manner. Whether he chooses the quick path to the exit door or an expansion of the war remains an open question. What's your take on US ground troops in Iran? Trump's high-stakes decision? Share your view in the comments. Do you think this will matter in the next news cycle? This video was generated using artificial intelligence.